Being a younger artist, having people to mentor me has been huge. Being able to see folks like Kim and Alistair and Stephanie who have had successful careers and who have made amazing music and have used that music as a vessel to create change in their communities, that just gives me so much energy. It makes me excited to wake up and to get to do music every single day. And I love what Stephanie said about collaboration, because I feel that so deeply. Every time we get in a room together or on a stage and we play music, we get each other a little bit deeper. Like Alistair said, that's how musicians connect with one another. We play music together.
Hello and welcome to the Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation and this extraordinary event in our Lowell lecture series that we call Mill Talks. I'm Bob Perry, I'm the museum's director, and as you may know, we have a concert scheduled on April 25th that will feature 7 great artist members of the Folk Collective. Well, 5 of those 7 musicians are here with us now, and the way I see it, the April 25th show will showcase what they do as members of the Folk Collective. They make beautiful music. But tonight is fundamentally about why they do it, how they got involved, and what being a part of the Folk Collective means to them personally. I have a quick set of important thank yous. Big thanks to all the Folk Collective artists participating this evening. You're going to meet them in a moment. Thank you to Mark Orelli, who curates the Second Shift music series. This is all his fault. He lined up the April 25th concert, and he's also here with us tonight. Thanks to the Lowell Institute for underwriting this event. And they also underwrite the GBH Forum Network, I should mention. Thank you, Passim, and their fantastic leadership team, including Chris Blagg and Jim Worcester, for this meaningful collaboration that is our great privilege. Thank you, Adam Klein and Amber Garcia. I step on applause, I'm sorry. Adam Klein and Amber Garcia at CK Communications Group, thank you. And thank you, Chelsea Mertz at WGBH, who was central to pulling this together as well. And of course, thank you to the wonderful and esteemed Callie Crossley. As you know, she's our moderator, and we're really grateful that you're here. Now I'd like to introduce Shay Rose, a gifted singer and songwriter in her own right, who, in collaboration with Passim, curates the Folk Collective. Shay has been a fantastic partner in identifying and tightening all the nuts and bolts that were used to construct tonight's event. I've loved working with you. Please welcome Shay Rose.
I thought I was going to have to get on the stage, but we're all at eye level. How are you feeling tonight? Good, welcome. This is my first time here, so it's really a delight. So much to learn. I'll have to come back when the seats are not here and there's not an incredible event happening. So my name is Shay Rose, and over the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of working closely with Passim to develop authentic, holistic, strategic approaches to ensuring that its stages, platforms, and programming are welcoming, inclusive, and representative of the diverse and rich tapestry that makes up the folk music genre and community. The Folk Collective is an artist-led, justice-led, multi-generational group of 12 select artists, musicians, teachers, artists, activists, and cultural thought leaders. So you're meeting 5 today, but there's actually 12. And through an active exchange with Passim of ideas and conversation, Passim collaborates with the Folk Collective to present inclusive, equitable events that welcome and invite diverse audiences and artists to the Passim stage. Can we get a round of applause for that? So this model was born out of a conversation that I had with Jim Worcester, who's here, the executive director of Passim. We spoke at length, and after the meeting, I kind of went home, and a couple of questions were resonating in my head. The first was, what is folk music? The second, where is folk music today, and where is it going? And the third, how can Passim honestly and authentically elevate, support, and hold space for folk music and folk artists and musicians in all of their various colors, shapes, voices, messages, and forms? I went home and I slept on it, and the next day the vision of the program model and the name, the Folk Collective, was born. It just poured out of me. It was kind of like a song that writes itself. And similar to a song that writes itself, your job is just to get out of the way, right? And really, that's what this model has been. It's been me stepping out of the way and Passim stepping out of the way and really inviting the artists to lead this transformation. Passim is learning to hold space for the artists to lead the transformation. And some of our artists might say, to lead the revolution. And some of our artists might say, to lead the reclaiming of a narrative. In 2 years, we've presented over 30 events that embodies Passim's aspiration to reflect folk music in all of its identities. Highlights include, over the past 2 years, Reimagining Lilith Fair, We Black Folk Festival. We had our first Women's History Month celebration, the Revolutionary Voices Festival. Upcoming, we have Indigenous Peoples Day, our first ever Pride Day event that's coming up. And then, of course, our event right here at the Charles River Museum, April 25th. Get your tickets now. Yeah? There's so much to celebrate, but there's also more to be done. That said, I want to share with you that this model that kind of poured out of me is not just a program. It is a model of transformation. It's a movement. It's a gathering of souls united by their love for humanity, for music, and storytelling. It's a mission, and in the mission, it's to preserve the richness of everyone's folk traditions while exploring the relevance of those traditions today. I'm proud of Passim, the Folk Collective, for embarking on this courageous journey of transformation together. And I'm thankful to all of you for coming this evening to learn more. I'm grateful for Bob and his team here at the museum for making space, and for Mark Arelli and GBH Forum Network and all the hands that have made this evening happen. Thank you for uplifting this important work. Can I get an amen? No. And I'm so grateful to this energy and essence and boldness and brilliance of Callie Crossley, who I met 10 years ago when I was aspiring and an artist, and she interviewed me, and I said, if there's one person that can do this, it's Callie. So thank you, Callie, so much for making space. Callie hosts Under the Radar with Callie Crossley and shares radio essays each Monday on GBH's Morning Edition. She has won numerous awards, including the prestigious Gold Baton DuPont Columbia Award, a National Edward R. Murrow Award, a National Emmy, and an Oscar nomination for her producer work on Eyes on the Prize, America's Civil Rights Years. She was awarded 2 Harvard fellowships and serves on the Board of Trustees of her alma mater, Wesley College. Thank you, Callie. And I will drink a lot of water because my mouth is parched right now. I would love to introduce the Folk Collective, Maxfield, Anju, Stephanie, Alistair, and Kim. And I will share the stage with you. Take it away.
Don't you know,
talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper
while they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation,
wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion.
Don't you know, talking about a revolution sounds like a whisper. Poor people gonna rise up and get their share. Poor people gonna rise up and take what's theirs. I said you better run, 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 run. Finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution.
Finally the tables are starting to turn,
Talking about a revolution. Talking about a revolution. Oh, I've been standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation,
wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around and waiting for a promotion.
Don't you know, I'm talking about a revolution that sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, I'm talking about a revolution that sounds like a whisper. 'Cause finally the tables are starting to turn, talking about a revolution.
Finally the tables are starting to turn,
Talking about a revolution. Talking about a revolution. Talking about a revolution. Talking about a revolution.
Maxfield Anderson, he's on the end there, an American roots multi-instrumentalist, teacher, writer, and music director living in Somerville, Massachusetts. As an artist, Maxfield aims to bring new light to honor traditions and to share the joy of making music with others. Next to him, Anju. Right, let me get Anju. Singer, songwriter, producer, and performer shaped by the people and places in Minnesota and Massachusetts. Anju was highlighted by NPR's All Songs Considered as an outstanding Tiny Desk contest entrant. They are currently teaching young musicians piano, violin, and guitar, and working on their debut full-length album. Next to Anju, Stephanie McKay, recording artist, arts educator, and advocate whose work lies at the intersection of music, education, and community. Stephanie has toured over 35 countries playing her original music at major festivals, appearing on TV and major radio stations in 5 continents. She is a member of the inaugural folk collective at the legendary Club Passim and founder of We Start With Art. Next to Stephanie, Alistair Mook, award-winning singer, songwriter, a Grammy-nominated family musician, social justice and songwriting educator for all ages, and co-founder of the Opening Doors Project, an anti-racist music organization. And finally, the award-winning Klingit artist, Kim Moberg, born in Juneau, Alaska, currently calls Cape Cod home. She began playing guitar at age 14. In 2014, wrote her first song, teaming up with Grammy-nominated producer John Evans to record 2 albums, Above Ground and Up Around the Bend. Her recognitions include the 2021 Rocky Mountain Songwriting Contest finalist, the 2021 Great American Songwriting Contest Folk Americana finalist, and the 2020, I think this is Connecticut, Folk Grassy Hill Songwriting Competition winner. So now, another round of applause. So when I do interviews, long interviews particularly, we like to know who we're dealing with, what are their credentials, who are the folk. That includes the people interviewing the folks. So I thought I'd give you my very tiny folk music credentials. Here they are. On Eyes on the Prize, America's Civil Rights Years, which was a, as you heard, Oscar-nominated documentary series, I worked with Guy Carawan. And some people might know that name. Guy is probably best known for having brought the song, which eventually we know now is We Shall Overcome, from the Roots people who sang We Will Overcome. And that got changed in the movement as activists, including the great Bernice Johnson Reagan, who we were talking about earlier, and the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee singers, changed the words. Same thing worked for We Shall Not Be Moved and some other songs, but worked directly with him as we were putting that music together for the series. So that's part of the training. Guy, as you know, was at Highlander Institute in Tennessee. He and Candy, his wife, were very active through their music and folk music specifically. The other part of my tiny, tiny folk music credentials are quite personal. Every Saturday morning, my mother would watch Westerns, and the other half of the day, she would play music, and here is a song that she played over and over again. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole, by the great Odetta. So I learned Odetta songs growing up, and that's it. That's my entire credentials. So I want to start with each of you because the title of this program is Many Voices, One Mission, the mission being the folk collective. Let's start with you, Maxfield. Why did you want to be a part of this? And as you're describing this, as we know, there's a spectrum of music under the umbrella folk. Where would you place the kind of music you play in that spectrum, along the spectrum?
Yeah, so the music that I play, I would describe as bluegrass and early Americana, early country music. To me, the folk collective, I wanted to be a part of this because I love Club Passim, first and foremost. I first came to Club Passim in 2015 to see a show, and since then I have really tried to involve myself with Club Passim in many different ways, including doing sound in the venue, working in the School of Music, and now in the folk collective. The folk collective has been an amazing community of people to be a part of, and for me, that's the most important thing that has come out of this is having a group of like-minded artists to have these discussions with, to make wonderful music with, and to just grow that community.
Be more specific. What discussions?
Yeah. So a lot of what we have been talking about is who has been allowed by the power structures to be in folk music. One of the first things that we talked about as a group was, what do we consider to be folk music? And pretty much everybody came back with, it is music by people, for people, to nourish the souls of people. And what we also talked about was how marginalized communities have not been allowed in folk music. The power structures, the music industry, media has left these people who undoubtedly helped create this genre. They have left them out of the conversation.
Okay. Same question to you, Anju. Why is this collective important to you, and where do you place your music along the spectrum of what we know as folk music?
Yeah, so I think I would place my music in the singer-songwriter acoustic folk corner of folk. And I think what draws me to this collective and what inspires me and keeps me here, I think, is you all. I think the folk collective members, I get to learn so much from you all, especially it being like very intergenerational, multiracial space. And like you said, we're all kind of coming from different corners of folk and have different relationships to this word folk. So I think that's what inspires me about getting to be part of this space. And I think just getting to have this really sweet reciprocal relationship with like an institution, which is really hard to find in most, like, I don't know, it's one thing to be in community with humans out in the world or be with friends, but I think like for an institution like Passim to be able to have this openness that I've experienced, I feel like that's really rare in institutions, so I think that also just gives me a lot of hope, and is also why I'm happy to be here.
Okay, Stephanie.
Well, I was born in the Bronx, from New York City, and I love the Bronx because wherever you go in the world, there's always somebody from the Bronx in the room. Hi, how are you? Welcome, and it becomes family. It's like, where did you grow up? Oh, I'm Pelham Parkway, Fordham Road. Yeah, oh, Fordham Road. All right. So I'm coming from hip hop music. I was born in the place in the birth of hip hop. And when I think of folk music, is music that comes from the community and is something that's passed down generation to generation. So I feel like this form of music that came out of the community is where I fall on the spectrum of folk music. It's poetry, words, rhythms inspired by Afro-Caribbean diaspora, Puerto Rican, Dominican, Jamaican. New York is just so culturally mixed. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's where the folk collective represents a history that I come from, living in New York City.
All right, Alistair.
So I first walked into the doors of Club Passim almost 30 years ago as a then young guy wanting to be, the next great singer-songwriter. Pretty steeped in tradition. I felt much more so than what was then kind of the focal point of folk music in Boston, which was more kind of contemporary singer-songwriter stuff. And so I've been involved for the last 30 years and doing shows at Passim. Why did I want to be involved? I think Shay had such a beautiful intentionality about bringing together not just racial diversity, but age diversity and gender and orientation diversity. And part of that spectrum is the old white man. There are two of us, actually. Peter Mulvey's a little bit older than me. I've been doing social justice work. It's been central to my work for a long time, but frankly, like the last 5 years, there was sort of a racial reckoning within myself that required a lot of internal work, and that I spent a lot of time thinking through and then working with peers of color in other organizations. And my friend Reggie Harris and I started an education program where we talk with kids about race. So that, and one of the things I learned through that program that I was slow to learn, but I slowly started to feel, is that there's a very necessary and distinct role for white folks in interracial conversations about race. In order to help teach and bring in new folks, people need to see themselves on stage. That representation matters in every corner. So I think there's a role, and each piece of the diversity of this folk collective really is what makes it what it has become.
Mm-hmm. Kim.
To me, folk music, as Max said, is defined as music of the people, and it covers such a huge umbrella of different styles of music. I grew up, when you talk about being old, I am the oldest one on this folk collective.
The most beautiful.
And I grew up a child of the late 60s, early 70s in the civil rights movement. And knowing that folk music was more than one person with a guitar, that it can encompass so many different types, really just when Shay talked to us about what the work was going to be, I just couldn't wait to jump on board. I found it to be extremely important work and still do. And for me, music was pretty much a savior. I grew up a military brat and I went to 10 different schools in 12 years. And so music really was the only constant in my life. And I kind of see myself as in the singer-songwriter corner of that. But the influences come from everywhere. My mother was a classical pianist for her whole life, and my father loved country western music. So it was everything. I grew up listening to everything from one end of the spectrum to the other and everything in between. But the first night that we all came together, I don't know that we knew exactly what we were going to be doing. And we kind of had to what is this really about? And to be associated and to know this group of people is such an honor. The level of commitment and the level of talent and the integrity of the people that has been curated for this group is it's an honor to be part of it.
So how has your music been shaped by this experience? Because, in a collective, there's so much rubbing up against each other. We've already described that there's so many areas in folk that you can go to. Many of you already represent that. I'm curious how your work then may have changed or been influenced by this experience. Stephanie?
I have a funny story. We do gigs together now out in the community, and I've developed this ritual with Maxfield that after each gig, we text each other a song, that we're familiar with or that we're listening to right now in our home. And it's always on the opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, he's deeply rooted in bluegrass music. So when he gives me a ride home from the gig, he turns me on to all these artists. Then I go home and watch a bunch of music documentaries, and I end up going in a deep dive and all Tony Rich and all these other names he taught me. And so it's shaped my music because I'm learning all the time from these incredible artists, styles from Alistair's guitar playing and this knowledge in blues to Andrew's knowledge of her music and culture, to Kim's knowledge. So I'm interested to see what this music is going to be that I'm going to create after coming out of this. I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maxfield, well, you're the other end of that, so why don't you answer next?
Yeah, so me and Stephanie have this really great ritual after shows.
I want some specifics.
But seriously, I look forward to that every time. It's you've shown me, you sent me an amazing Brazilian artist that I think your son turned you on to, correct? And I think that for me, it's just been a broadening of all the different musics that are out there and that are right within my immediate circle. I've gotten to play with people that I never thought that I would get to play with. I got to play on Kim's album release show. Stephanie and I just did a show with Cliff Notes at the Planetarium. Cliff's music is so hard to define, and I never thought that I would be playing violin on a hip-hop track in the Planetarium. And so those kind of things, again, it comes back to the fact that folk music is music for everybody. We're all creating folk music, and being around so many inspiring folk musicians has just proven that point over and over and over again.
Who else would like to add?
Yeah, I can share. I would say that I think maybe as a younger folk collective member, I entered this group pretty musically isolated. I grew up playing Western classical piano and violin, and it was a very rigid and perfectionist and competitive environment. And I think folk music is how I found healing and loosening in my musical world. And so I think, but being in this collective, this has been some of the first times in my adult life that I've gotten to play my own music with other people, with really amazing skilled musicians, and get to jump into songs together. So I think it's just been, and since then so many other blooms and openings of collaboration have emerged. So I think for me it's just been a big opening and melting away from the isolation, the musical isolation that I was in prior to joining the folk collective.
Okay. Alistair?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do. This is what musicians do, right? But so when we rub up against other musicians, we form relationships, and then it's quick to move to music and collaboration. But the question is, who are we rubbing up against, right? And I think, I give Passim so much credit because they're taking on something that's hard to do, and it's hard to do in a non-performative way. But the issues that we're addressing at Club Passim are just the issues that the music world, the folk and Americana music world sees, which is it's blindingly white. Nobody is trying to be exclusionary, but you know who you know, right? And so people make music with who they know, and so you see cycles of repetition with that. And to me, what's been remarkable about this group is that, and it would only work because the Passim staff and Matt and Abby who are here and the board have been so supportive of it, it's allowed new rubbings up against each other. And the 12 people in this group is just what's exciting to me is I'm seeing it flourish out in beginning to sort of reach out into the wider community more and more and more. And next year there's going to be a new folk collective group of 12 people, and that to me is what's exciting. Is we've been lucky enough to have this little ride, but the idea of now getting out of the way and the next group comes in and then building on that for years to come, that feels like real change to me.
Kim?
I've become, because of the work that we're trying to do here in the collective, my writing's become a little bit more intentional. I've done, topical songs, but now I'm concentrating much more on trying to get a wider view and widen my lens about what I'm seeing so that I can write more about what I'm seeing. And I agree with what everybody said here. The way this particular cohort has been curated, it's allowed us to learn so much more from one another. And that's got to be influential in our music as we create.
Mm-hmm. So let me pick up on what you said, Alistair, about blindingly white as an image of folk music, which is true. But what goes along with that is what you all are trying to work against, which is that the foundation of folk music, wherever you put it on the spectrum, has black roots, period. The instrumentation directly brought from Africa, some of the other musical traditions brought from communities formed here, and yet that just got divorced and erased along the way. So when you all perform, have your conversations, and are performing your conversations, if you will, by your very existence and the mission of the collective, you're often facing people who are like, what are you doing? Because you're not doing what I think is folk. So how has that been to interact as you've been a part of this and been pushing to make your mission understood, and also the history of the genre, however it's defined along the spectrum, understood in terms of its foundation?
I think upholding history, really upholding the names of the people who've created the music. I know at different shows I've performed with my folk collective colleagues, we mention the history, we play the history for the audience, we play a song that was by Leslie Riddle.
Yeah. Leslie Riddle, yeah.
Go ahead, do you want to say a little bit about it?
Sure. I think that this all kind of ties into the big conversation that's happening around Beyonce's new record.
Yes.
And people asking the question, is this country enough? And yeah, one of the things that I have done in the School of Music as a teacher is making sure that we are talking about the folks who created this music. Leslie Riddle is one of the folks who I am hugely inspired by. Leslie was essentially a member of the Carter family. He helped A.P. Carter collect many songs that became the backbone of American country music. And he often doesn't get talked about in the conversations of the conceptions of country music. And it's so important that we scream those names and that we make sure that people know who is contributing to the music.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think when I entered the folk collective, I was loosely like, yes, this feels like an important thing for us to be doing and talking about. But I think I've also been very lucky to be in a very progressive and supportive like bubble of fellow artists of color, fellow like supportive artists who are like invested in naming these histories and these lineages that are Black and Indigenous and of color. And but I think I had kind of an eye-opening moment. I was sharing with Shay this past weekend. One of our folk collective friends, Naomi Westwater, has been curating a series around reclaiming folk and was having us having folk artists of color share our music and share cover songs by traditional folk artists of color. And we ended up receiving like pushback from the audience in a really unexpected way. And I think that was a very eye-opening moment for me to be reminded of how relevant and resonant this conversation is and this work that we're doing. And I think Beyonce's record too just brought it to front of mind. So I'm like, yeah, wow, this is I'm really grateful to have been in my like supportive bubble, and I'm also like, oh wow, the more I explore outside of it, the more I realize some of us are on just really different pages about this genre or genre.
Well, say more about that, because pushback in some way, that's not real, what you're saying, or please don't play that. I mean, what was the response?
Yeah, it was like an older white man in the audience who effectively, like Naomi was sharing about their work and being an artist of color in the folk realm and feeling like creating Naomi's series. I don't want to speak too much for Naomi, but creating this series to center folk artists of color, and this person in the audience effectively like interrupted Naomi and was like, I think you're taking this too far, and seemed to be really, really uncomfortable. And I think for me, I'm like, yeah, I think something that I've been thinking about lately is like, how can we like expand people's capacities for being uncomfortable? Because I think that's what this work kind of requires. So I think I've just, since that moment, I've been thinking about that too. It's like, yeah, we're probably making people uncomfortable, and I don't know, can music be a tool in like helping people hold that, or just like it's important to feel uncomfortable, but also like how can we expand and support people in expanding their ability to feel that discomfort?
It's interesting because I keep thinking about Rhiannon Giddens, who I have been screaming from the rooftops, is the lick on, does the lick and the banjo on Texas Hold'em for Beyonce, in case y'all didn't know that. But, and people are like, who, what? And of course, you know, as one of the founders of the Carolina Chocolate Drops, and the string, but mostly the emphasis on the string instruments, which are the foundation for country and folk. So to me, what should, not obviously what should be happening, but what makes it easier, it would seem to be in these discussions, is if you could say, here's the banjo. Where do we think the banjo came from? I mean, this is not, I didn't make this up. This is where it came from. You know what I mean? And this is who learned it from the folks who had the banjo originally. And I just wonder how those conversations are having. Because sometimes it's just plain, I don't want to hear what you're saying. And sometimes it's actually complete shock, as we are observing now from the Beyonce sort of revolution going on at the same moment we're having this conversation. I wonder if you agree, or think that's part of it. You're out here experiencing it. I'm just hearing a little bit.
Yeah, education is a big part of it. And I'm sorry. Education is a big part of this work, and also upholding the history and showing the lineage. And so I think if we include that in our performances, I think it would really help continue the conversation, and just acknowledging that we're part of a continuum. We're nothing new. This is something that's been done before, and we're part of a continuum that's trying to uphold this lineage.
Kim, did you want to add?
Just even our performances on the Club Passim stage, you know, that is opening people's minds and opening people's eyes to, oh, you know, this can be a lot more than what I thought it was. And there's been minor pushback, but you know, it's all about having the conversations and trying to educate people and say, no, look, this is why this is folk.
Now, how much? A lot. I'm going to say at the beginning, but I'll respond to it. How much shaping of the image of folk has to do with just commerciality, if I could make up a word. It's just commercial success and what was pushed by people who are in the business of selling records and selling music, and that just grew and grew and grew to the point where it's concretized in some people's minds because other people didn't have those opportunities to reach that level of commercial success.
Well, I think that goes back to the very beginning of recorded music. I mean, race records and hillbilly records were the two distinctions that that recording companies made early on to sell albums to that were not in the pop music vein. They found that there was a market of poor people they could sell to, and all of this is so wrapped in our country's history because everything is separate. Has always been in our country. You need separate records for white people and separate records for black people. And so the fact that country music and folk music have become perceived to be so white is, I think marketing has a lot to do with it. Mark Orelli and I were talking on the way over here about some of the, I've thought about this a lot over the years as somebody with strong blues roots, and Mark is too. We sort of, as young musicians coming up, we would look around, and one of my big heroes was Taj Mahal. And I would look around and say, where are the other black musicians that are playing this roots music? And so a lot of that was ignorance because there were a lot more people out there than I knew about, many of whom are still in our Guy Davis, and on it, there's many. But, I don't really know if I know the answer to it, but my suspicion is that for a lot of black Americans, that music is wrapped up in a lot of trauma and cultural trauma, and whereas white folks can sing merrily about the boll weevil, it's a reminder for a lot of people about like deep poverty, and so people look to other places, and hip hop is in many ways the opposite because it's all about looking forward. Although now hip-hop's reached an age where it's looking backwards too, right? But so I think part of our work as musicians in general in this group and more broadly is to tell the stories of all the black and brown musicians who've been here all along the way and who play the banjo and all that stuff, but also to pull in people who do what's not considered by some to be folk music. Like, there's no reason why hip-hop shouldn't be considered folk music. So one of the things we did, one of our performances, we did a Kendrick Lamar song, and we at that Raising Voices festival in the revolutionary spaces, we were at the Old South Meeting House, and we were sort of tasked with coming up with some folk songs. So I think we picked a Joni Mitchell song, Tracy Chapman, and then Kendrick Lamar was one of them. Yep. And there was a black sound man there who came up afterwards, and he was so jazzed, and he said, I didn't know folk music could sound like that. And we were like, yeah, neither did we.
Yeah. Well, speaking of moments, because there was Tracy Chapman and Luke, give me his last name. Combs. Moment at the award ceremony, the Grammys. Any sense that had any ripple effects? Or was it just a moment in time? I mean, much of that had to do with the fact that he honored her well before they got there. So there was that. But there was a lot of, this guy could make some money off of it, but was she able to? Same kind of thing. I was wondering what your response was to that moment.
I was happy to see it. I was happy to see that he was sharing the stage because we don't have enough stories across racial lines, and we don't have enough stories about people working together when historically people have worked together. People have sacrificed for one another. People have taken bullets for one another, and they've been different races fighting for the same purpose and mission. So I liked seeing that, and I felt as a black woman that this white man was saying, hey, I sang her song and I honored her. I felt it was very affirming for me to see it, and I was just so happy to see Tracy Chapman perform again and be out, and not her history be erased for a new generation, thinking that that's a Luke Combs record and not knowing anything about Tracy Chapman. So that's all.
I would agree with that, and to me, songs tell stories, and songs are also very personal, and they mean something different to each person. And so I had heard a lot of pushback on, oh, but, it doesn't mean the same thing the way Luke is singing it. And of course it doesn't, but that's okay. That wasn't okay. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that, especially because he brought her up and he made people aware that this is where the song came from. And I felt like it was okay for him to sing that song and tell his story through that song.
Yeah, music is universal. Music is universal. It doesn't have a color. It's like it's an emotion that people feel from the lyrics, from the melody. So I really liked that moment.
Well, I mentioned it because, it's not too far a day when he wouldn't have mentioned it, nor would she have gotten credit. And, years later we would find out about it. So it is kind of, sadly, even in 2024, a kind of remarkable moment in time, and good for him and good for her. So here's a broader question, because there's many voices, one mission that you have. We've talked about how you've been changed and about how you'd like to see this having a bigger effect. Maybe you could speak in broader terms about what is gained by having a collective like this be a part of the folk experience, and what is lost when it's something like this is not happening.
Yeah, I think that going forward with a broader impact for the folk collective, I hope to see this kind of model being embraced by other institutions like Club Passim, other folk venues, other educational institutions, because I think that it really works. I think that Shay's idea of putting people together in community to come up with ideas and to push back against the power structures, it really works, and we need people to say that we are willing to invest the time and the money and the space and the manpower and everything in order to make that happen.
I think it's incredibly important to continue this kind of work. The separation that we see now is not even healthy, and when we can come together and learn about other people's stories through their music, it just creates empathy and just a better life for everybody.
Yeah, I feel really appreciative of what Shay was saying earlier about like Passim as an institution kind of stepping out of the way and just creating a container for those of us collective members to really like lead this process with our ideas and dreams. And I think that feels really unique and really valuable to me, because I think usually institutions are beholden to particular stakeholders and whatnot. Not that Passim isn't, but I think there's just like a centering of the artist's voice that feels really, really special and unique and important that I hope to see ripple out elsewhere.
Yeah, we've experienced since being in the folk collective messages like grow with us and we are all Passim, and also this is your club. The general manager says this is your club, and every time you have an idea as an artist in this group, you can bring it to them and they're saying, they're considering it and having a conversation. I don't think I've ever had that in my whole career, and that's very empowering.
I think we also know that this is sort of the first step on a much longer journey, and as special as this is in some ways it's sort of the easy part, which is diversifying the stage. The harder part is diversifying the audience, and that's part of the conversations we've been having a lot. There's a lot of barriers. There's location, and there's perception. How do you get a place like Passim, or name any cultural institution that's predominantly white around Boston? How do you get folks of color to look in the window and say, I want to go in that space, I'll feel safe in that space? I think that takes a lot of work, but I think it's the intention behind it is how we start to get there. Is like, it's not, every venue around Boston now has a land acknowledgement, right? And that's beautiful, but what the fuck are you doing to actually advance equity for Native Americans, right? Like, if you're not sending money to a tribe, like, as an audience member, I don't want to hear it. Like, that to me is the essence of what performative, virtue signaling is. I think this is something else.
I will say, well, and maybe this is not a question for you, because one of the beauties of your organization, of course, is this is artist-led. So in that way, you have shaped this experience in a way that we don't know what it would look like if it were from an institution. However, you are associated with Passim, which is like saying Harvard in certain circles. So that has a, immediately, I would assume, but you tell me because you're out in the world performing in places other than Boston, that this makes a statement beyond the borders because it is Passim. Right, wrong? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I would agree with that statement.
And I think that's a very important thing to understand. They've set a standard, and because Passim is so well known in the folk community, people are looking to that saying, what's happening there? What exactly is the folk collective? And it's really exciting to see that Shay's been approached by other institutions and organizations and clubs to ask what the model is, and is there a way that, can this model work for us? And so that's starting to show that people are paying attention and caring. I don't know that they'd pay that much attention this soon if it wasn't Club Passim who started it.
Yeah, that was my thought. Is this the only collective of its kind thus far that you know of in this particular music genre arena?
I think that's
As far as I know, yeah.
So that's kind of a little bit mind-blowing.
Callie, I was part of a predominantly black and brown collective that in the children's music space, starting in 2000. A group of us came together, and it was the same fight, but we didn't have an institution like this we were connected to. So we had a bunch of artists. I learned a ton through that about where the obstacles were, how much anger there was that I didn't see around me as a white artist, the way results got replicated over and over again. And some of what I think we made tremendous progress. And I think that actually, it's another conversation, but the children's music world has fundamentally changed over the last 5 years. But it was very hostile. Like, there were some really ugly things that ended up happening that maybe were necessary, but one of the things that is so warming for me about this is that it's been all collaborative. And the fact that we do have such a prestigious institution that is putting themselves out there to do this is, instead of fighting, we've been given the opportunity to model what this can look like. And so one of the things I'm excited about is these powerful people over here, when they take this model to the Folk Alliance conference and national things, to say, look, this is what we did in our space, and if we can do this here, you can do this in your space too.
Well, what would you be saying to other artists to encourage them to actually replicate this model someplace else, or to do what you've done here? What would you want other artists to know and to do, actually? Because now that you've had the experience, maybe you do some things differently. Because again, as I pointed out, this is an artist-led collective. So it really stems from how you decide you want to direct it.
I would want them to collaborate as much as possible, because I feel like when you make the music together and you perform together, there's an understanding of someone else's world that you didn't have before. Being in their band, singing backup for them, really getting into their world of their music, it opens up your perspective, and it opens up what is possible, in musically, but also just in life.
Okay.
So collaboration would be.
And mentoring. I think mentoring is really important. I'm mentoring a young 17-year-old aspiring artist right now, and have introduced him to the music of the Folk Collective, to Folk Alliance, and it's music he's never heard of at all, and he's absolutely amazed. And same with I have two daughters, one that's 25 and one that's 20, introducing them to this type of music, has been eye-opening for them, because it shows them that music is a continuum. We're here, and this is popular music now, but it came from somewhere. It started somewhere. There's a line somewhere. And it's just so important, I think, to mentor younger people that way.
I think being a younger artist, having people to mentor me has been huge. Being able to see folks like Kim and Alistair and Stephanie who have had successful careers and who have made amazing music and have used that music as a vessel to create change in their communities. That just gives me so much energy. It makes me excited to wake up and to get to do music every single day. And I love what Stephanie said about collaboration, because I feel that so deeply. Every time we get in a room together or on a stage and we play music, we get each other a little bit deeper. Like Alistair said, that's how musicians connect with one another. We play music together. And I think that having collaboration at the front of a model like the Folk Collective is absolutely necessary to create that community.
So part of your mission is to the education of folks, to let them understand about this is roots music, it's all for all people, there's a foundation for Black folks, all of that. And I have found recently, just paying attention, that so many of the young people, the ones that you're mentoring now, are way more open to the idea of what you're saying, to the history. Many of them are ignorant of it, but they're very open to it because music is global now. And I'm thinking most recently of having gone to the Museum of Boston's Museum of Modern Art to watch the Korean exhibit Hallyu. And I didn't know till I went to that exhibit that K-pop was strictly from communities. And the first connection in the US was to immigrant communities. I did not know that. So here we are on the other side of the world. And who knew we were all gonna be doing BTS, because these young people, know the song, and so now I know it. So I'm just wondering, it seems to me that there is an opportunity from not only your performances, but people learning about the work and thinking about it differently and sampling it through all of what you put out there or what they hear in social media as a way to expand this mission or undergird it, if it will. And I wondered if you agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I feel super inspired by young people, especially or when I work with young people, and also just the young. I guess I'm young, but like young people in my life too, or younger people than me. But anyway, I feel like I feel like young people are able to keep it real, because I think we've seen these systems that are built on prioritizing profits over people. We've seen, there's no way you can, or I think there's no way you can look at this and be like, this is working. These systems that we've created are healthy and sustainable. I wouldn't say that, and I think a lot of young people have seen them fail. So I think that's where that openness, maybe part of where that openness comes from, and I feel really inspired by that, and just the young people keeping it real really is nice, and the older people who are mentoring and building those connections and who share that openness. Yeah.
It just felt like your story about the pushback. I just wonder if that would have happened from a younger person.
Yeah.
I
doubt it. Yeah.
I don't know. I have an interesting story about my son, who had never stepped foot in Club Passim, but came recently to a show because I was performing. And he felt safe enough to say, yeah, that's my mom. And so we put to the question, what do you think folk music is to the audience? And so my son shouts out banjo music. That's all. He just said banjo music. But then out of the Folk Collective, one of my colleagues is curating a program, an artist-led curation called Folk Next Gen. And now my son will be performing at Club Passim after just thinking Club Mastery. And he will be performing a song from history, which is a poem from Oscar Brown Jr., highlighting the history of folk from another era. So these are the things that are possible when you're in this. Yeah.
So I'm curating that show. Get your tickets. It's October, clubpassim.org. My daughter will also be performing, and we've got Aiden Buck is going to be performing, quite possibly Owen Arelli. We don't know yet. We're keeping our fingers crossed on that. It's October 5th. Thank you, October 5th. But again, that's a great way to pass on, and mentor and show that. And the younger generation has been yeah, I'd love to do that. That's so cool. I'd love to play with you.
This intergenerational thing. So,
No, she's talking to me.
okay.
Yeah.
The intergenerational part, I think, was the most surprising, wonderful part of this to me. So, first of all, when you ask, how do we do this well in other places, Passim is really spoiled because we have this incredible human, Shay Rose, who this is all through her, and she refuses to come up and be part of the conversations, but the thoughtfulness and every step of it that has gone into this is all coming from Shay, and that's unique, and so other clubs are going to have a hard time because they don't have a Shay.
Okay.
But one of the things that she did, that I would never have thought of, is so we have all this, we have racial diversity and we have other kinds of diversity, but the age diversity was the one that was most surprising to me because, it'd be easy to sort of say, well, let's find a bunch of established people in their life and but having this age range of some people in our group of just graduating from music school and others are out of college and making their first albums, and then some of us are, growing mold, and having that range.
For yourself.
Having the range has been hugely important, and we do think differently generation to generation. So having those voices at the table, they push us, and it's just it really has made this. It's added a layer to it that I didn't expect. I didn't see coming. But
Shay was very, very deliberate in how this model turned out. A ton of thought that went into it and a whole bunch of work. So, we have so much to thank her for.
Well, it's a good transition to audience questions. And before I go to you, let me just say, I do know that it's Boston's Museum of Fine Art. So I mixed up MoMA and Fine Art. So just so that they know I know this. Questions?
And please do use the audience mic.
Thank you. I have a question probably for Max, because you sort of addressed it before about how we consider folk nourishing our souls, and that's sort of what we think of it as. So my question really is this new form, I'll call it new form, or evolved form with the Caribbean backbeats or the hip-hop aspect introduced with the folk music, is that folk music, or is it fusion folk, or is this just the evolution of folk, I guess is my question, and that's just folk? So is the new stuff the evolution of folk, or is it fusion folk?
Folk. I think it's all folk music. That's what we're getting at. It doesn't have to have another adjective put in front of it to describe it. It is folk music. When we look at folk music, a lot of what we talk about is the content and not as much the specific aesthetic sounds that are happening. And so when I hear a song that is talking about real life stories, that is folk music to me. Yeah.
When I moved here from New York City, which was in 1983, I found that the folk scene here was much more approachable than it was in New York. In New York, if we went down to the Greenwich Village or something, it was really expensive and there were lines and it was really hard to get in. But here, there's WUMB. And I was wondering if you interface a lot with UMB, which I find a fabulous entry and informational place for folk music. I mean, both current and history, because they often give the history of the musicians, etc.
We actually shockingly haven't. The former program manager, Brian Quinn, is back there. I see him of WUMB, and we really do need to connect. That is one of the great resources here. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Hi there. As you were talking about the different varieties of folk, I was thinking about an interview I heard a couple of years ago that defined hip-hop as folk, and I'm a big lover of music, but specifically hip-hop and folk music. I never put them together before, so my mind was blown after that interview, right? But then as I started to think about that, and the way they defined it was like the stories of America, and by that definition, then hip-hop has to be folk, and I completely align with it. But then as I thought about it more, I was like, well, by that definition, nothing can't be defined as folk. So what genres would you say you wouldn't classify as folk by the definition of the stories of America?
That's good. Good question. Who wants to take that?
Look, I think we put things in boxes because that's what we want to know. We're looking for a sound, right? When we go into I was going to say a record store, forget it.
Yeah.
So there's always there's a tension, right? Like we want somebody to narrow stuff and curate a little bit for us, but that's also where all the problems come in. So like we have to push, and generally I think musicians do push back on those boundaries. It's audiences that tend to stick to this is a sound, but that's, if you listen to the history of folk music, it's, Woody Guthrie was as punk as there is, and to my ears, like the musicians that do the best current interpretation of Woody Guthrie music are punk musicians or hip hop musicians. Like they're the people who are most like challenging systems and like willing to touch all the third rails and stuff. So, these are all just nonsense words that we make up, but we have to keep challenging it. Otherwise we get stuck in these circles that we know are not healthy.
So I had a question. I'm the guy you need to talk to because I teach corporate finance to 18-year-olds. So I'm the profit and loss guy. And I want to talk to you, Callie, because I give my corporate finance students one of the books you recommended.
Oh.
Yes, and they love it.
Which one is that?
The $40 Million Slaves.
Oh, yeah.
They love it
Yeah.
because it talks about sports.
Yeah, right.
But what I want to ask you, and I don't know this, so you have to tell me, what is the collective? I have no idea. Thank you.
Your question is, what is the collective?
I have no idea.
Yeah, so the Folk Collective is a group of 12 people, and we meet...
Soon to be another cohort.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we meet regularly, and we discuss issues related to folk music. Anybody want to add on to that?
And those issues related to folk music could be anything from how do we sustain our careers, how do we manage ourselves, what music we're working on, what needs maybe we want to collaborate. Does somebody know other musicians? It's just a community of resources where you can get guidance, you can learn from each other, you can curate, you can teach, and I look at the Folk Collective as a generative community of resources and help.
Yeah, I'd say like a group of people shaping the institution that is Club Passim. Yeah.
And also helping to define what the meaning of folk is, and helping people understand how inclusive it is.
I want to go back to her question because it's really bothering me, because I did some research before I came here, and I remember reading an article of a lady who said, and she studies folk music, and she was a historian, and she said folk music comes from the community, and it's something that's passed down from generation to generation. So what music wouldn't I qualify as folk? I don't know, a music that's not passed down from a ritual or a culture that existed previous generations? I mean, or something that didn't come from, what music doesn't come from community? Yeah.
Maybe the definition is that they're different folks, and so therefore that's how you.
I think, Susan?
It's the only thing I can come up with.
Okay. I have a question. It's not really a question, it's an observation. As a person of color who didn't go to Passim's that much, I almost always, when I'm there, look around in the audience, and I'm glad you mentioned the audience, Alistair, and see how many people of color are there, and not many in most cases. What I can say is that for the folk collective performances, there have been more people of color there, and I think that's really, really important. You're bringing in folks. It may just be your relatives and your friends, but you're bringing in folks, and it's a different experience. I can tell you one of my most amazing experiences was, Stephanie, when you did a performance there and your son was there, and your son played the drums, and people applauded you, and your son hollered out, "That's my mom!" But it was so un-Passim in the way it happened, and I think that's really important. I think that there's a certain staidness there about how people listen to music, and I like that, because who wants to be there when somebody is clicking and talking and when you're trying to hear something? And it's a wonderful venue to hear the music, but it's just the audience brings a different experience, and I just think as Passim works on the collective and getting more artists on the stage, I think it's good that it's thinking about how do they get a different audience in the club itself to listen.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. And just to shout out, Bill's husband, Kemp, is a big part of the work that's happening at Passim and one of the great artists in that group. And Kemp and I have a co-bill on Saturday in Wakefield.
Is this on? I was just going to say, I think that there's a brand of boy band music that's basically written by corporate executives. I think there's a kind of genre of pop music that I would say is not folk music. So I think if you think about the sort of music industry and how music can be produced by corporate bigwigs, that's not folk.
I think there are qualities, right, of folk music that you sort of feel it, like this is what folk music means to me, is there's the audience is part of the thing. It's not one directional performing at you. There's something communal about it. So I think those are qualities that I consider folk, but within that framework, the music can sound like anything, right? And we can Kendrick Lamar puts on a big show that probably is hard to call folk when he's got 40 people on stage and there's in a stadium. But when we take a song, or if he were to come to Passim and break it down and do his thing, that's folk music to me.
Right. If there's a give and take involved, if there's communication between the performer and an audience member, that's folk.
Yeah, and I think that the artist's intention of what their music has just as much to do with that. Is this commercial music, or is this music for people? What's going on in the writing room before the song is even performed?
I would only say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So that's all I'm going to say. So there is that.
I was just curious if anyone here comes from the time that I was really into folk music. We used to go to the Club 47. Did anybody go? That was before Passim. Yeah, it was really quite amazing. And when I was playing folk music, we were totally mesmerized by Robert Johnson, Mississippi John Hurt. We weren't looking to Joni Mitchell, but it was different, and it was very beautiful music. But I'd like to, be able to read more about my history with folk music. I'd love to hear more about the early days of folk music in Boston, because it was a very exciting time. Paul Butterfield Blues Band, it just goes on and on, the people that I saw. So that wasn't as much of a question.
I love hearing that story, and I know that Club 47 was one of the only venues during that time that had black musicians play on the stage, because Cambridge was very segregated
But I love hearing that. Thank you for sharing that.
I had just a quick observation, my name is Mark Arelli. I help curate the Second Shift music series here at the museum. If you were to just look from a distance upon a large group of people, it's a crowd. It's just a crowd. The less closely you look at something, the less interesting it is. If you were to go up and talk to all those people individually in the crowd, get their stories, get their dreams, their aspirations, their fears, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more diverse and a lot more interesting. And that, I think, is what the Folk Collective is doing. I actually don't really care what the definition of folk music or any genre of music is. I care about the stories that people have to offer in whatever their medium is. My favorite is music. So I care about all the stories. I feel like we're going to get better music when we draw from more stories. It's just a statistical reality. And so the Folk Collective, in my mind, is doing us a great service by forcing people, sometimes against their will, to look at folk music more closely. And when you look at music more closely, it starts to get more interesting. They're not all white guys or all white girls with guitars. Some of them play different instruments. Some of them aren't white, and it starts to get a little more diverse, a lot more diverse, and a lot more interesting. So I just want to thank you guys for the hard work that you're doing, because you're kind of on the vanguard and the front lines of this, and sometimes you get a little blowback, but I do think it's worth it for the music that we all love. So thank you.
It looks like it's it. Did you have closing words? One of you has closing words before we get our...
It's our turn. This was a whirlwind journey, 2 or 3 weeks pulling this together, but what a payoff. Thank you, all 6 of you, for carrying this conversation forward. I've loved how it flowed, I love how it developed, and I got everything out of it that I thought that I would if we got you all together, and I'm inspired.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Callie. Thank you so much. Yes, give it up. And we're going to close with another song.